Hey guys, Dan McCrae in Monero, candidate for the Liberal Democrats. So I'm here visiting the beautiful Nimmitabel. Some of you may or may not know Andrew Thaler is a fellow dissident of sorts, and he's fairly well known in the area, and he's agreed to give me a bit of a guided tour. Now Andrew, thanks for having me.
That's right, thanks. G'day mate. G'day shoppers.
G'day shop. I like your haircut. It's very becoming.
Just confirming that I'm bald as well.
Yeah, I can actually grow a full head, I just don't.
I can't.
Mate, I'm standing here in your hometown, and there's this amazing looking mill behind me. I'll give you a bit of a view. Can you give us a rundown of what the story is?
Yeah, so this is the traditional stone-style Dutch mill originally. So if you could picture it, it would have had the wind blades or the wind sails on it that you see that we...
So like the old windmills you see in
Holland
movies
and Germany.
Yeah,
exactly.
Amazing.
So this was built by a fella called Geldmacher, and on the sign over there,
It's called Geldmacher's Mill?
Geldmacher's Mill.
Yeah.
So he came over in the 1860s, and it says he was a naturalised, so he became an Aussie. So he was a German, and he built this pretty much by himself, and he put the sails on it, and he had crushing plant in it, so he could crush grain that was grown locally.
So it was a wind-powered.
Wind-powered.
So it's very... No emissions?
No emissions, renewable energy.
Renewable energy?
Yeah,
okay, and what happened with that?
Well, it's quite curious. There's a couple of versions of the story, and the important one is that there were sails on it, and it was pretty tall, and we're on the top of the hill at Nimmitabel. Obviously, this is the best place for the wind coming over from the snowy from the western area. Now, the locals apparently got the shits, and they made him take the wind blades off. And the problem with taking the wind blades off is then there's nothing to turn the crushing plant.
Yeah,
so he had to then harness up horses in a turnstile and make horses walk around in a circle all day to run the crushing plant. So he's got a renewable energy powered mill, which then became an instrument of torture for horses. And I think that's pretty cruel. But here's the thing. It wasn't so much the legitimate excuse put out was that the wind sails turning created shadow flicker, which scared the horses. But if you look carefully, it's that the wind blades were taller than the Catholic Church's little steeple cross.
Ah, okay.
And in those days, the Catholic Church had to be the dominant structure in the landscape. The cross was always the highest in the town.
Yeah.
If you go down to Bendigo or Ballarat, Sydney, even Melbourne, you'll see, not so much now because we've got skyscrapers, but you'll see back then that the churches had progressively more insanely steep steeples and then the cross on the top, because it had to be the dominant structure. It was a control mechanism.
That's really interesting. Now, reading the sign there, it actually sort of says that they basically banned him from operating his mill at some point. So even back in, it was 65.
No, 1872 roughly, he got the mill running. And so... See, in 1865, when he started, that was inside the bandwidth of when Alexander Graham Berry had taken the first municipal councils to court all the way to the Privy Council in England, and the Privy Council agreed that the imposition of local government or municipal councils was unlawful.
That's interesting. Now, my platform in all this is pretty well, I'm not really pro-government kind of guy. I'd like to have 90% of them sacked. We don't need most of what we've got. But it is amazing how, even back then, we've got local governments and local officials sticking their nose into individual citizens' businesses and lives.
And vested interest too, all right? So what we found, if you look at the history of Alexander Graham Berry, he was in the Shoalhaven district, it's actually where I was born and where I grew up, is that the local ratbags, I suppose, is the politest way, they managed to get onto the council and be given the authority of being a council. And they then set about imposing regulations on Alexander Berry. They made him build roads. They made him set aside land. They made him give up his concessions for what they wanted. And he argued back against it and said no. So we've got Geldmacher here in Nimmitabel, which is 400 kilometres away from Shoalhaven, about as remote south as you could have got from Sydney in those days.
At the time, yeah.
Building a mill with his own bare hands and his own ingenuity and getting treated like shit for it. You had Alexander Graham Berry, who, one of the first settlers out of Sydney to the southern districts. He turned away from the Hunter and he went south.
Yeah.
And he had to go all the way to the Privy Council in England. And then, of course, with the imposition of the Australia Act, we don't have a route to the Privy council anymore. And if you look carefully, that's where what's his name in Western Australia, Rod Culleton's
Oh,
been going.
the Culleton gang having a bit of a
Yeah.
bit of a crack over there,
So-
stirring the pot.
Yeah, I follow that. It'll be interesting to see if they do. They have filed and they're sort of getting somewhere. But one of my big things you would have noticed that I always say is you have to look to the past to see where you're going to go in the future. So renewable energy, that's something that I'm quite passionate and I support. And here we see
One of
Nimmitabel,
the early versions of.
one of the earliest renewable energy protests in Australia. It's just insane.
Isn't it
And
just?
people say, oh, where do you live, Andrew? And they've never heard of it. But I tell you what, it's a funny little place.
Well, and look, and the beauty of this is all, local stone that
It's
he's built.
still here.
And it's standing, and it's a beautiful looking structure. It's pretty amazing, yeah?
It's like the pyramids of Egypt. They haven't fallen
They
down.
haven't fallen down
They're
yet.
still there, and it's a subtle reminder. Now, here's the best part about Mr. Geldmacher. I actually quite like him. Geldmacher gifted his land to the public after he died. So this is Geldmacher's mill, held in perpetuity now for the public. And we've got the community centre right here next to us, and then there's Geldmacher's cottage
Oh,
just
so
down the
that
road.
was all his as well. this
All
whole
his?
sort of bit.
And he gifted it to the public to be held in perpetuity for the benefit of the public.
Yeah, right.
So it's kind of like he thought, well, you guys screwed me over, but I'll have the last word here, and I'll set this as a memorial
you
for
won't,
future
you won't be
generations.
getting rid of me that easy.
And you've got tour guide, you've got a walk path, you've got the, it's on the map. Geldmacher's Mill is on the map, and anybody that stops to look at Geldmacher Mill reads the story.
Well, I just did, and you heard me. I burst out laughing as soon as I read the bit about, the government overreach, basically telling him sorry he's not allowed to operate after they obviously let him build it, and then they decided no, we don't approve.
See, back then, you owned land, we still do now, you owned land in fee simple, and that means that you own the land in entitled equivalence to the king. So the king sets aside some of his land, you pay him gold or silver or whatever you do, an agreed amount.
The trading currencies at the time.
And
yep.
as much as the king owned all of the land as the crown and took it off the Aboriginal or First Nations or the blackfellas, you owned that land in equivalence to the king. Now, Geldmacher didn't have to ask for permission to build his mill, he just had to do it. And the hardest thing was he had to collect all the rocks in a dray. He had to get all the rocks up there because there wasn't electricity back then. We're talking 1865.
Yep.
So very,
So
very
it's a feat of
clever.
ingenuity, it's
Oh,
a feat of
impressive.
tenacity, it's a cracking job. And now they try to tell us what we're not allowed to do.
Exactly.
And
you,
this is the sort of structure that can be built when you've got doers doing,
yeah.
which is what I love. I love it when doers do as opposed to not. And one of the other things we were talking about, Andrew, was one of the signs over here.
I want to
on
take
the
you.
road. You want to take me and show me this? 'Cause
We'll walk down.
It is pretty funny. Like, I mean, we've just had a bit of a chat about government overreach, and we've had a bit of a talk about
Yeah. So we're
silly
in.
things that happen.
So I'll fill you in. We're in Snowy Monero Regional Council area, and they're apparently the control authority, if you would believe it. Snowy Monero Regional Council has an ABN. So in other words, they're a corporation registered with the Australian Tax Office with an ABN, and they are ostensibly telling us that they make rules for us, and they've made some new rules which I find quite funny, and you'll see in a second.
Now, anyone who's never been to Nimmitabel, what did we just say, 280?
Maybe 240 people
240
in the village, and might be half a dozen streets really. Pretty quiet. I think we've had one car go past us in the hour.
We saw there was one went past a little while ago, and then a truck earlier, so somebody else is working for a living.
So it's a pretty quiet area, and we don't have any traffic signs or traffic lights really. We've got some giveaways.
A giveaway makes a bit of sense.
Well, it's a crossroad, it's a highway.
Yeah.
But, we don't have any rules about parking on the side of the street until last week. And what's sprung up now is that we have a
1 hour parking sign.
1 hour parking sign.
There we go. Sorry, my camera skills a bit sideways.
So
1 hour parking in Nimmitabel.
There's a 1 hour parking on this street, on this side of the street, but not on the other side of the street.
And how many people would be likely to actually park here? I don't know, yearly.
Well, it's been a discussion in the past that business owners shouldn't park out front of their business because they're using up the car parks that visitors
Of
would
course,
want to use.
yeah,
If you want someone to stop at your business and you're on the highway and you're a coffee shop or a bakery or something,
You wanna
don't
make
park in front of your own shop.
Make it as accessible as possible
Exactly.
for customers.
So some of the ladies who work in the bakery who live out of town park in this street normally
and then walk down around the
and
corner.
walk down around,
Yeah.
or we get some caravans come and park here and then they'll go and walk down around the street.
Yeah.
Council in its wisdom has decided to make it a 1 hour limit, but the thing is, it's only a 1 hour limit if somebody comes out to enforce it.
Well, that's right. You know,
So who's going to enforce? Because I'm not going to. Who's going to enforce the 1 hour limit in a street which is 35-kilometre drive from Cooma? The rangers aren't coming out here.
Mate, and if they do, you've got to question how much it's going to cost them in taxpayer funds, in hourly rate / salary, plus petrol, plus wear and tear on a car.
Probably
to drive
more
from
than the
Cooma
fine.
to come out here and issue some poor lady who's just trying to earn a living around the corner for parking for longer than an hour in a street with no population.
It probably costs
That's
more.
how fresh it is. I don't know how much they've cost to install this.
But the thing is, you just park on the other side of the street.
Yeah, well, mate, looking, this is a street, guys. You know, like this is not a highly populated area. The fact that they've wasted taxpayer money on this sort of thing, and we all know how I feel about wasting taxpayer money. There really should be a lot less of it. Should be a lot less of government in general. But it's,
on that
it's
topic,
quite farcical.
yeah. So on that topic, need to show you something, which is something that gave me a good tickle. So, Dean here, Liberal Democrats. I'm an independent. I talk and work with everybody. We had Karen Porter here the other day, and Dean's now the second aspiring politician to stop in Nimmitabel, and I'm very grateful for that. And I said I'm happy to help all the candidates. Christy, Fiona, you know where we are. I'll send you the map if we need to. The one that wears the bloody green, Kathy Griff, you're welcome to stop in, but don't bring Lee Rhiannon with you. We don't need her. But I showed Dean this in the cafe, and I think we want to try and finish off with it. So,
this is pretty funny, yeah, for sure.
So Dean wants to be, more about more self-autonomy, less government, less rule making, and what have you.
I didn't realise that me and this fella had as much in common as we seem to do after looking at this video. So
we'll play it. We'll finish off with it. But Dean's got a kindred spirit in the National Party. Let me tell you.
Yeah, I didn't know.
Now the internet's a bit. Come on, the internet's a bit slow here. It'll take a little bit to. Have to rewind. Come on. Anyway, it was the Barnaby Joyce video, and if it doesn't play, we might have to.
I'll just upload it at the end of the video.
Here we go.
Oh, here we go.
Well, you probably wonder what politicians do on Christmas Eve. Well, when it's drought, feed cattle. Now, you don't have to convince me that the climate's not changing. It is changing. And my problem's always been whether you believe a new tax is going to change it back. Look, I just don't want the government anymore in my life. I'm sick of the government being in my life. And the other thing is, I think we've got to...
So I've got to say, I agree, Barnaby, 100%. I think I've had enough of the government being in everybody's life.
I think Barnaby's in the wrong party.
I think he could be by the sounds of that.
He needs to join the Liberal Democrats.
I mean, it does sound like it. I mean, look, we advocate for most of it. We do have some crossovers in policies. We're all about supporting farmers to run their properties as they see fit, but we're also about, yes, less government in your life. We'd like to get elected and leave everybody alone. As opposed to, well, Mr. Geldmacher having powers that be stick their noses in. So, look, Andrew, thanks so much for inviting me. Well,
no,
you didn't really invite me, but
we put the call out.
We put the call out, and here I am.
So it's 2.5 weeks to go.
Yeah, 2.5 weeks, mate. Look, I'm in the middle of my little tour around the area. I've been Eden, Bega, Marimbula, Narooma, Tobago. I've done the round, so now I'm here at Nimmitabel.
And out of fairness, we're not going to ask you to pick a favourite. We're just going to say thanks for coming in, and we hope to see you again. And I'll shout your coffee in Queanbeyan next time.
Mate, well done. Thanks so much. And Nimmitabel's a beautiful little town. Thanks for having me.
No worries. Cheers.
All right. Beautiful, mate.